record to this?
Mhm.
Okay, so now you want to play the clip? Can you play the clip?
Oh, can you not see it?
Oh, no, I don't. Um, are you screen sharing?
Yeah, I was streaming full screen right there,
Oh,
and you're not seeing it anymore.
oh, here we go. I can click on, there's a little tab for Kyle's screen that I can look up. Okay, but I don't know that that means it's recording.
You should see a little dot up by your camera, and that means it's recording. Or oh, maybe that doesn't mean it's recording. On my end, it says recording in the top right corner.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I see that. But I mean, so it's okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now recording.
When you said it was dangerous, I just thought that it is dangerous and it's stupid.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Do you think it's a little dangerous?
I mean, I hope it isn't dangerous.
My writing is voluntary, like the beating of my heart. Writing is a journey into the unknown.
You're coming dangerously close.
Anyway, don't you think it's dangerous to rely too much on...
You think it's dangerous?
You think it's dangerous?
Writing is dangerous.
A very powerful psychedelic and a little dangerous.
Okay, man, let me tell you, Kyle, I have watched that 100 times and I never get tired of it. I am so impressed. Hi, everybody. I'm Johnny Neill. I'm your host. And this is my friend Kyle Scott. He's our
Hi.
co-host. And
Hello,
I'm
hello.
really excited to be here. This is Welcome to Writing is Dangerous, episode 1, in which over the next 13 weeks, we are going to start with a story, a short story that I wrote, and adapt it, a 14-page short story. We're going to use the Hart Chart to make an outline, and then over 3 weeks, we're going to outline, break down this short story, figure out our outline, and then over 10 weeks, 3 pages a week, 3 to 5 pages a week. By the end of that 10 weeks, we'll have a half-hour episode. So here we go. If you want to keep up, just follow along and do your own writing. I want to tell you a bit about myself. You know what I mean? Write your own story along with ours, because every story kind of, you might not realize it, but every story kind of needs to hit the same goalposts along the way before you get to the end. Even if those goalposts are told in flashbacks or flash forwards, those are emotional beats. Don't let me get ahead of myself, Kyle. I I tend to kind of think in layers more than in a linear way. I'm doing it again. So my name is Johnny Neill. I'm a fifth generation Texan. I graduated in 2024 with a Master of Fine Arts from the David Lynch Graduate School of Cinematic Arts at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa. Yes, David Lynch was one of my teachers, in that he gave us once per semester, he gave us kind of an endless time of an Ask Me Anything Zoom lecture. So, yes, he was one of my teachers, and I will always cherish that.
You don't
Uh,
need to validate yourself.
well, it's one of those things where it's like it's not just his name on the wall, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
or on my diploma.
Duh.
But also we were the last graduating class to get him for all 4 semesters before he passed away in December. So that is real special to me. I'll carry that in my heart forever. But in addition to that, it was a pretty great program, we wrote a script every semester. And then for 3 semesters, we had to write a different script each semester. And then the fourth semester, we could either write a new one or pick one of the three and revise it, which is what I did. So I've written so I've written a feature, a pilot, and then another feature. And then I've got about 20 years worth of short story writing, one of which is what we're going to adapt over the course of this course. I don't want to call it a course, over the course of this lab. I want to make okay, so that's me. Also, I was in the Army for 7 years. I have been a house husband for 27 years. I used to work pipelines. I'm still a painter. As you can see, I keep my brushes close. And I spent the first part of my life wanting to be a portrait artist. And I'm fascinated by people and their faces. I tried to tell their narrative through just a visual of what they looked like. And then my eyes kind of went to shit. So I started writing and trying to figure out my Army years. And that turned into an obsession. And I kind of fell in love with writing. And so then during COVID, I signed up for distance learning with Maharishi University. I needed 3 semesters to graduate after a 23-year chicken in the bread pan, pecking out dough approach to credits. And at the end of those 3 semesters, I didn't want it to end. So, and I also thought, even though I'd been writing prose for all those years, and I had kind of figured it out during my undergrad, I thought, because the David Lynch program was available, and I just thought, well, I'm not up for that. I had already learned transcendental meditation, and I've been a David Lynch fan my whole life. But I thought, well, David Lynch is going to David Lynch. I don't know if you could learn to do what he does, you know? And turns out you can. You just have to have a really open mind about what it is that he does. So I kind of ran an inventory of who are my favorite writers, or rather, who are the writers that influenced my worldview more than anybody else. And my number one writer that influenced my worldview was Rod Serling. And he, though he did plenty of it, is not known for his prose. He's known for his screenwriting. And so there was that. And then my number two was G.B. Trudeau, Gary Trudeau, who writes Doonesbury, which I grew up on. I've been reading for 50 years. And so it was kind of like, oh, writers don't have to be novelists. A writer can write. It doesn't matter. As long as you're writing, you're writing. You can write a plumbing manual and you're still putting words together to tell information. What are the two purposes of writing? To inform or to entertain. If you're lucky, you can do both. So that's me. Kyle, tell us about yourself.
So I've got 15 years experience behind the camera. I've been fortunate to direct commercials for brands like Verizon, Terminex, ServiceMaster, Clean. And I'm also a visual artist. I do a lot of art directing on advertising campaigns, bringing brands to life, kind of focusing on that human connection and that the moments behind the message, These days, my focus has shifted to biotech and organic farming, where I'm directing documentary shorts that explore the beauty, struggle, and profound importance of sustainable agriculture.
So that's great. That's great. Also, let's not leave out, you have extensive podcasting experience. You're kind of the man on the spot for quite a few local productions, and
it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but I'm not embarrassed of it anymore. I was in college. Funny enough, it's almost like a mystical, totem, that I walked into the break room at my job one day and this website was up, and it was some friends of ours that do a local podcast here. And oh, what's this? And it's like 2 years later, I find myself talking to these guys online every day, driving down here to Austin, Texas to meet strangers I met on the internet. And that was probably 20 years ago.
And that was, you lived in another state. You weren't even,
Yeah.
yeah. So you
Memphis,
saw
Tennessee.
a podcast from here and now you live here. I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Like an origin story, you know, like
I know. I think it's more common now, especially like online dating. Back when I met all of you guys here, you were part of that group as well. Although we didn't really get to know each other until I'd already moved here. But back then, the idea of meeting somebody for a date online was like, oh, they're gonna axe murder you. And now people do it every other day of the week, meet strangers and go have drinks with them and stuff.
that's I'm feel blessed that you moved down here because I'm a fifth generation Texan. I'm kind of stuck here. So and I'm not one of those Yankee go home types. I'm like, bring it on. I like the melange. Mix it up, mix it up.
I love
Bring
when
some
you
fresh
tell people
blood.
you're a Texan and then some of your anecdotes, it's like, yeah, no shit, you're a Texan. Like listen to the way you talk. I'm taking a chicken pecking approach.
I'm an original Texan. My fifth generation grandfather, Robert Elijah Neill, he fought at the Battle of San Jacinto with Sam Houston in the defeat of Santa Anna, and then he went on to be a Texas Ranger for 2 years. And
Damn.
it wasn't until the last couple of years that I found out the whole story on this guy. This whole time, he was this major badass cowboy. He only had one arm. He had crushed his arm his arm had been crushed by a mill wheel when he was 8 years old. He just had a little dead baby arm hanging tucked into his sleeve. So here he was riding horses and shooting bad guys. I just think that's fascinating, and I'm trying to work him into a piece of kind of fantasy history, Davy Crockett versus the Illuminati, which is my magnum opus. I'm not ready to write yet, so I'm working my way up to that by starting mini magnum opuses to include what we're going to do here. Um, but yeah, I'm real proud of my Texas heritage. It's nice to be from someplace that is almost everybody knows stories about. We have our own, and I don't want to go off on a Texas tangent, but if you ask a Texan, who the founding fathers are, they're not going to say George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. They're going to say Sam Houston and, Mirabeau Lamar and Davy Crockett, and Davy Crockett's a big hero of mine, lifetime hero of mine. So anyway, enough about that. Enough about my 2030.
Don't forget the guy who invented the nacho. His name was Nacho.
Oh, there you go. And he was also a luchador. No, that's a different nacho. So what we're going to do, we're going to use two things. The Hollywood Standard, which is, I don't know if this is backwards to what you're looking at. This is by Christopher Riley. This was given to me by Dimitri Pompey when I got into, who was also part of the podcasting world, very successful screenwriter and one of the best guys you'll ever meet in your life. You'd be lucky if you met somebody like Dimitri Pompey at any point in your writing experience because he will fill you in on the facts. This is it's if you have a question about formatting, look at all the white on those pages. These are just samples, and look at all the white on those pages. That's a really good reference. Even though things are Hollywood standards, the real Hollywood standard is, do I understand what you're trying to tell me? That's the rule number one of all writing. And then the other is by John Truby. It's called The Anatomy of Genre, which is almost like a horoscope of the different kind of stories going from the most basic story, horror, to the most complicated story, love. Guess what horror movies are about, Kyle? What's the message? What's the underlying message of every horror movie?
Would it be? I'm embarrassed. I've actually read that chapter
I know.
twice.
I know, it's so easy.
Mortality or religion?
Yes, exactly. The basic message of every horror movie is we're all going to die. And which leads me into a psychobabble of the reason horror movies are so popular with teenagers is because they don't think they're ever going to die. It's all the stupid people on the movie that are going to die, and they can get a big kick out of it because they're young and immortal. Guess what? So the second genre is myth. And the message of myth is, well, what if we don't have to die? And so that's where the that's and everything on the 12 build up from there. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll touch on those. But I recommend this book to everybody, not just if you want to write, but if you want to understand not film, but stories for what they are. It really helps you recognize what's going on, the four pillars of society, and what is the secret message that is running through this genre. What is it that you're getting out of a certain kind of movie that you aren't even aware that's what you're getting out of? Like for me,
Yeah.
Westerns. I was really surprised to read in his chapter on Westerns because a Western isn't just set in the Old West. The deal with a Western is you go in knowing that all those people are already dead and that everything is new. They're creating a new form of life or a new lifestyle in a foreign place, and what it takes to do that is to wipe out the people that are there already, and then to fight your fellow man who is trying to set up their version of what's going on. There's something about that raw frontier justice, lack of rules, and self-reliance, chop your own wood, carry your own water, that Westerns have that no other form of movie really has, because no other part of the world had in such modern times, just prior and during the Industrial Revolution, and post-Civil War, until the railroad was completed, that weird little 50-year westward expansion. The rest of the world was, fairly conquered already. And the way we did it was such a bulldozer approach, as opposed to how the Europeans colonized Africa or other places. We didn't really colonize, we conquered. And that's something that is a Western thing that doesn't apply anywhere else. Maybe Australia, but they were still subjects of the Queen. So anyway, again, getting ahead of myself.
Uh-huh.
Screenwriting, Kyle, what do you think of screenwriting? How do you like it? You're kind of new to it, so I'd like to hear your fresh take on what is it that confuses you about it and what is it that you like about it.
Well, I think the biggest hurdle initially, obviously, is the formatting. It's anybody, I mean, everyone has, if you have a basic public school education, you've had to write short stories, and you've had to tackle that first chunk of literacy. So then you get into all of the rules for making these things consistent. There's the reason it's a format, and it's something that we can all agree on and follow in terms of making a film. So then I guess once you get over that hurdle, the big thing for me is I find myself, I really love rewriting. Um, because when something a lot of my friends do, and why I'm kind of coming to this so late, I didn't go to school I guess I went to school for animation and design, but they didn't have a filmmaking program at my school. But every one of my friends has said, I got an idea for a movie. And, or I'm working on a script, which is just another coded way of saying, I just got an idea for a movie. But it's not until you get it on paper and you start thinking about it and what is this supposed to do? What am I trying to say here? And that's where rewriting becomes this magical thing of, oh yeah, I just move a couple pieces here, and now you got this. And then you rewrite it again, and it's like, oh, now I got this. So the real kind of eye opener in my limited time in this world has been the beauty and the magic of the rewrite. But I find myself still struggling with a lot of basic formatting stuff, some very laughable things. And I think that's where we get to the title of this podcast, writing is dangerous. I am falling flat on my face and making some very basic beginner mistakes that honestly I've been scared to make. I've been scared to put myself out there. And, it's such an important part of developing yourself in whatever, creative discipline you're in. I'm just feeling very privileged to have been kind of invited on this journey with you, and I'm hoping this writing lab not only makes me a better writer, but gives me some opportunities to look dumb and stupid and learn from that.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you have made documentaries, you've made commercials, you have maintained narrative from the first frame to the last frame, but it was a presentation of facts, right?
Yeah.
That's so you've already in the there's the old apocryphal story that somebody said, "Hey, Michelangelo, how did you make this David so well?" And he said, "Oh, I took a big block of marble." Well, he said it Italian. I took a big block of marble and I took out all the parts of it that weren't David. And it's like, that's the stupidest thing that a teacher can tell their student is, just take out all the parts that aren't the story. And I'm going, I don't have a block of marble. I have to create my block of marble. When you make a documentary, you've got a block of marble. You've got something that you're working with to create something out of. When you're writing a story from scratch, all you've got is your ideas. That you have to fabricate that block of marble by writing down those ideas. And I don't want to harp on David Lynch too much, but he had a really practical thing, and that is if you get an idea that just pops in your head out of the blue, which is something that happens a lot if you start meditating, but that's another conversation for another time. If you get an idea for a movie or a story, or you don't have to know what it's for, but you know that there's something there. It's pulling on you. There's a reason it popped in your head. Write it down. Just write it down. You don't have to provide context. You don't have to put before, middle, or end. Just write down that idea and keep those. And, we all carry phones. Write it in your notes app. You don't have to have a sticky note tab in your pocket. And when you've got a collection of those ideas, kind of lay them out in front of you and then play a little, solitaire game. Well, what if this event happened? Or what if this idea, how can I make this into an event? Because your idea might be, the dog has to go to the vet, and then you go, well, what happened? Why does the dog have to go to the vet? Or what bad news did you get from the vet? And what the thing is that once you put some focus on your idea and you validate your idea by writing it down and making it real, that's so important, is to make it real. Then it's going to start drawing other ideas. It's going to start to expand and take on a life of its own. And taking on a life of its own is the most important thing that can happen to a script. If you ever, or any kind of a writing, I know that I've struggled with writing a story, so many of my Army stories, because I was in a nuclear missile unit in peacetime in the early 80s in Germany, and everything about that was weird. Nuclear missiles are weird to stare at for hours at a time and to contemplate, oh, the apocalypse is for real. These things are going to cause the apocalypse any minute now, because the alarms would go off and they would have a drill.
Your resume just says Apocalypse Incorporated.
Apocalypse then. I'm still floating in a cloud, So, yeah, make things real. Write everything down. And I'm going to encourage you to start journaling. Everybody, if you have an idea and you don't have time, you just wrote it down. Once you start trying to make a story, start journaling. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. No matter what my
one thing about that though is journaling has always been something I'm jealous of people who can do that. I've found it's a lot more fun to journal as somebody else.
Oh,
Like, it's also a lot easier in my eyes. Like, talking about yourself or your thoughts can be a little daunting, but if you have an idea for a story and you just start kind of getting it down, like, it flows. At least for me.
you mean like taking the point of view of your protagonist or antagonist or a side
Or
character?
even just outlining, we were chatting last week about something I'm working on, and you were like, start journaling on it. So it's like, what does this world look like? Who are these characters? What do they
Yes.
want? What are they thinking about? It's interesting because it's not factual. It's imaginary.
Yeah.
It's, you're creating it. Yeah, that seems a little less intimidating for me than pouring my heart out.
Well, that's the dangerous part, isn't it?
Mhm.
The write what you know does not necessarily mean if you're a welder, you have to write about welding. It means if you're a welder who's had a broken, if your character is a welder who's had a broken heart, you can put what you know about a broken heart into your welder. That's and yeah, you can of course get specific about things like that about writing what you know. For examples, um, like I could write about being a soldier or working pipelines or, travel, scuba diving. I definitely write about scuba diving. Um,
I
so
can't hear you say working pipelines without hearing a euphemism in my head.
I just found my when I was cleaning up my office to prepare it for this show, I found my union card
Mm.
from 1979. My 1979 union
Ooh.
card. I had to lie about my age. My father was a bulldozer operator and he worked on the Alaska pipeline. And so he lied. And that's how it was in 1979. You didn't have to even show ID. It was like they didn't verify or vet or anything. But I worked summers. I worked on pipelines. I worked as a welder's helper, and then I went in the army. And I've been, yeah. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying, or that's part of Write What You Know. Of course, it is for the practical side, but it's mostly about the emotional side. It's mostly about being able to dig deep in yourself to bring those characters to life. I've written on You have to bring those characters to life, even if you don't like those characters. You have to give them a fair shake. I was writing army stories where I used to have this platoon sergeant when I was a mechanic. He was the motor sergeant, and he was a pain in the ass to me. He had a grudge with me over a couple of things. Some of it was my fault, but not all of it. But the tiered power structure of the army, it doesn't matter if they're above you and they're mad at you, there's really nothing you can do about it. And I had a lot of resentment towards this guy. Still years later, I didn't even realize how much resentment I had about him until I tried to write about him. And I realized I was just writing Bluto. He was just a big cartoonish bad guy. And somehow or another, his being such a bad guy, I'm like, so don't you see that I was the victim here? And it's like, well, I was just another character in his life. To him, I was the bad guy because I was a pain in the ass. Always be willing to wear your antagonist's shoes. When you're writing, always be willing to put yourself in their point of view because everybody has wants, everybody has needs, everybody has wounds, and nobody knows what the hell they're doing. That's the we just spent an hour trying to figure out how to make this thing a live stream on my YouTube channel. And both of us have done this before, and we still don't know what we're doing. So don't feel bad if you don't know what you're doing when you're writing. One of the beautiful things about a screenplay is that it is not a finished product, no matter how finished it gets. Nobody's lining up to read your screenplay. Your screenplay is not going to go to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Your screenplay is part of a collaboration. It is the seed of all of the collaborations that go into a movie or television production. It is the very center. Nobody has a job until you type the end on your screenplay and somebody buys it. So
Ah.
keep that in mind. What you're doing is so important. And let me talk about screenplays for a minute. Screenplays started, of course, back when the silent movies started, but movies were already happening. There was a shop in Los Angeles, read this in the Hollywood Standard. There was a shop in Los Angeles called Barb's Script Service. And this is in the silent era. And it was full of stenographers, typists, and they had mimeograph machines. So the directors and producers would send notes of what they had filmed that day to Barb's Script Service, and then they would create this outline. They formulated it. The people who had to type up all this raw information were the ones who figured out what a script would look like to be the most productive for everybody else who has to put together a movie based on a silent movie that it was like, okay, yell Snidely Whiplash, and then they would just keep notes of what they did, and then it would be, okay, this is what happens in this scene, and then they could standardize. So they standardized what a script looks like, and a screenplay looks different than a play script. A screenplay looks different than an outline, and it sure looks different than a short story. So a screenplay. So I think that's fascinating that the screenplay was formatted by the people who had to gather all these notes from all these different people, and nobody was invested in the one that they were working on, and they might be working on a different one the next day. So they had to format so that each one of them understood what the other person was doing when they would get, okay, type up, Cecil B. DeMille's thing from yesterday. You know what I'm saying? I think that's fascinating that it was such a practical. I worked admin before, and I understand the value of formatting, a memorandum for record over a letter of inquiry. They all do different jobs. So I think that's cool that the administrative typists were the ones who said, "Oh, we came up with something. We're trained secretaries. We came up with a way to keep track of this stuff." And that has
just another thing women gave us that they didn't get due credit for.
Yet another. Like there should be a special thanks at the end of every movie. Thanks, Barb's House of Mimeographic Women. So that's how screenplays happened, and I think it's amazing that 100 years later, the format hasn't really changed much. It's we go through some different variables, but it's still the same basic thing: action lines and dialogue. Now, another thing, you got to move real fast. A page of screenplay should take a minute of screen. So when I see a script that has big, chunky blocks of exposition, and then a big, chunky block of dialogue, and then another big chunk, and it's like, oh, he wiped his brow, takes beat. He picks his nose, beat. Then he scratches his belly, beat, and says, blah, 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 and starts reciting the Constitution. It's like, no, don't ever put beat. That's like, I see that all the time. And it's like, one, don't direct on the page. That's something you'll always hear. Don't direct on the page. Leave things, give the most basic explanation or the most basic presentation of what the character is doing for your actor and your director to figure out how to lay that out, if that makes any sense. So there is that little parenthetical under a character's name. That's where you put that. And it's like yells, cries, stutters. Don't spell out phonetic stuttering. Just say they stutter. Leave it to the actor. Southern accent. Don't say, well, I declare. Don't put everything in standard English. But if there's something, some kind of spin on it, put that in there, or put it in an action line. Character walks with a limp and speaks with a stutter. They'll know where to put the stutter. You don't have to say he limped over. You've already established that. You know what I'm saying? Keep it simple. Keep it really simple, because what you really don't want to have happen is somebody reads your script. First off, a producer or an actor is not going to be the first person to read your script. Before it ever gets to anybody who's going to write a check for anything, it goes through one of those people that worked for Barb. It goes through a script reader that works for a studio or for a competition or whatever, and they're reading 4 or 5 scripts a day. So if you put Pink Floyd's Run Like Hell plays on the jukebox, the first thing they're going to do is, wait, what is Run Like Hell? I know Pink Floyd. I know wait, which song is that? Oh, yeah. And then they're going to go, wow, this guy's got a lot of money. How's he going to get the rights to Run Like Hell? And chances are good that if you were that specific about that song cue, then the whole scene is built around that song. You're stealing somebody else's art to be another voice in your project, and that's not right. Right off the bat, that's not right. That's a form of plagiarism. And you've if you take that song out, then the scene doesn't work. Probably. I mean, so instead of something like that, just say 60s psychedelic music plays. Everybody's got their own version, like if you need, because I do like saying what is happening in the sound on a scene. I'm a very who, what, where, and when. The why is kind of up to my viewer. You know what I mean? Like, don't explain why somebody's doing something. If you say that they moved from one corner of the room to the other, that's fine. But don't say he moved to the one corner of the room to the other because his keys were in a bowl on the table and he was thinking, I might need to hold on to my keys so in case something happens later. It's like, no, just tell me what I'm looking at. Tell me what you want me to see on the screen. Don't it's a very touchy line, what they call internal states. Don't write internal states. Don't tell me what somebody's thinking, except every now and then when it's important. Like if there's something that might encourage an insert flashback, but you can also just put insert flashback. Again, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I kind of do that. There's just a whole lot of stuff that I think people take for granted about screenplays, and then they start writing them, and they don't know what they hit the second act stall because they have an idea for a movie, they don't have a story for a movie. And
I
there's
had a question that I'd like for you to clarify. Something we talk about is when you're reading a page and you go, this is supposed to be a screenplay, this isn't supposed to be prose. What do you mean by that?
well, in a short story, well, for one, in a short, or in fiction, whatever, you have a fiction writer sits on a princely throne. He can say Homer Simpson walked into the room, and you're not violating any kind of copyright, Or you can say Elvis played on the radio, and you're not and that's just real rudimentary. The world is your oyster when you're writing something because now, you can't necessarily put, he started singing Heartbreak Hotel and then put the lyrics to Heartbreak Hotel. There are limits to what's allowed there. But you can say, this guy talks like Homer Simpson, and he said, dough, something along those lines. So there are some sketchy little, not sketchy, but dotted line connections there. But mostly, when you write in prose, even if you're writing in first person, okay, if you're writing in first person in prose, you can say what somebody's thinking. You can narrate their whole life story in just real basic, in fact, well, so what we're going to do over this week, we're going to adapt. I think I already said this. We're going to adapt a short story that I wrote in my last semester of my undergrad. It's a 14-page short story. I've reread it since then, and it holds up as a story, but it's nothing I would submit to the New Yorker. I didn't revise it. I hadn't read it since I wrote it, and I was really under the gun when I wrote it. I wrote it in one sitting. I had an idea, and the idea is real basic. A news cameraman. Okay, this is what we're going to do this season. We're going to adapt a short story I wrote called Totality, based on a few things that are in my own life in a write what you know way. A news cameraman, segment director in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and his field reporter take a road trip on assignment, take a road trip to Sedalia, Missouri, to see the total eclipse that happened, I don't know, like 10 years ago. There was a total eclipse, and there was one 20-mile path from Oregon to Mississippi, I think, that you could see the totality. The rest of the country, we got to see the egg slide off the plate. We got bites out of the sun, but they got to see the mythical totality, the thing that made the Aztecs gods.
Kill each other.
Yeah, and I'd always been fascinated by that, and I was kind of jealous of him. And then the story that he put together that showed on the news was just so fantastic. So there was that. I was always kind of jealous that he got to go, and I really didn't even know anybody who had seen one. I'd seen several partial eclipses, lunar and solar, but I had never seen a total one until a few years ago, and I was like, oh yeah, my fascination was justified. Uh,
Random, but have you ever seen a eclipse through a disco ball? So
no,
I have young kids, and
right,
getting them to wear the glasses isn't always a first, and you don't want them staring at the eclipse.
right.
So somebody was like, buy a disco ball, and we did. And during this most recent one, what it does is it just shines the reflection of the eclipse. It was in our backyard, so all over our fence, we saw little eclipses everywhere. It was
And you,
really cool.
and you got to watch it track across.
The we watched through the glasses, so
Sure.
I didn't see much movement with the disco ball, but yeah, I imagine so. It would have probably been distorted in some crazy ways, but
Well,
it's
I
been a
have
neat way to
seen
see it.
I've seen like during a partial eclipse how the shadows have a little chunk out of them, which that fascinates me. Like that's beyond my realm of astrophysics understanding how light from so far away, being covered from so far away, still casts a shadow. Like, do you know what I'm talking? Did you see
Oh
that? I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of the same thing, and I'm like, I don't get how that happens. Like it just seems like.
I've tried to recreate that, and it's impossible. I mean, I haven't been able to, but I've tried to.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like that's something that would
The sun
be
is just so much brighter than we can even imagine.
that
Like,
is that.
faking sunlight is not as easy as you'd think.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter how hard we try. So so what happens in the story, he covers the solar eclipse. By the way, I have read this story. It's not exactly an audible.com quality reading, and when we get over the next week, I'm going to have writingisdangerous.com up and running, and the story will be on there, as well as episodes and the pages that we write during this program. Um, every week, the page will be updated, and it'll be a repository for short stories, artwork, short films, anything else. I'm pretty excited to get the webpage off the ground. Kind of ran out of time. We got Austin Film Festival this weekend, and I really wanted to have our first episode up before before Austin Film Festival actually kicks off tonight. So I'm kind of under the gun. So yeah, we've had a lot going on here with our lives between the two of us. Um, so the fantastic element, okay, a solar eclipse is pretty amazing anyway, and then so Joel, my protagonist in this story, wears a Casio G-Shock, solar powered Casio G-Shock watch. Gonna look into whether they had the phases of the moon model in those days or not. But you know what? It doesn't matter because if this gets produced, it will probably not. Yes, it's
Nice.
pretty much the one I have. Mine's the diver version, but this is one of those things where where I feel a little flexible on name branding and the like is because I feel like if you say Casio G-Shock, everybody knows what it is. It's almost like saying Thermos or Kleenex or those are brand names, but or drywall for that matter. Those are brand names that stand in for the product. So I don't feel like I'm stepping on anybody's copyright toes, but if this was to be produced, they probably, have to come up with a fake brand, unless Casio signed in, which who knows? You just never know when you're dealing with an outsider. So I had this Casio G-Shock scuba watch that I just fell in love with. I had never been comfortable wearing a watch, and I bought this scuba watch, and I just fell in love with wearing a watch and having a watch, even in this age of having a phone with a clock on it during the solar eclipse, when he hits the timer on his watch because it's going to last for 1 minute 45 seconds, and so he doesn't look at his watch, and then he hits the timer to stop. When he does get a chance to look at his watch while he's in the van, he looks down and the screen is blank. Something has happened. Some kind of something happened between the sun and the solar panel on his watch that rejiggered his watch. First, it's flat, just a flat black. And then as the day goes on, it resets. And he's like, oh, okay, everything's fine. Until the next morning when his watch starts giving him messages. And he decides to listen to the messages. It just sends like a simple word in the LCD block letters. The first one's boobs, because that's the first thing everybody learned to write on a calculator. 80085. And then
And
left.
it's that point in the script where I just, what kind of boobs are we talking? And then I get up. I'm kidding.
And then left, and then right. It starts giving him signals. They come from a news story after the high of the news story of the solar eclipse. The story was great, and it went out on the whole regional wire. And Joel is already going, okay, you're going to be the third news guy I coached into the big leagues. From our local channel, they consider Joel to be a star maker. He is able to make his field reporters look so good that they get poached by bigger markets. Joel has already been in the bigger markets. He had worked in Miami. This is true, by the way. Joel had already been in the bigger markets and didn't like it. He didn't make more money. He got less recognition, and he got ran around more. So he comes back to Arkansas. This is all before the story starts, but it's in the narrative of the short. He comes back to Arkansas and is like, this is where I am going to live. And so he takes on his sense of being a newsman is he likes his community to feel safe. So they're living in, or they cover a news story that's about vandalism at a car lot, and it's based on a guy losing his job and getting his car repossessed. And it's like, that's not the kind of story Joel likes to tell. And as they're leaving and they're kind of bummed out, and they're in a hurry to get the thing done, his watch buzzes and says left. And he says, hey, take this left up here. And so they take a left, and they see a couple of cop cars in a cul-de-sac, and they pull in, and it turns out that a kid is selling lemonade. School has already started because the story happens in September, but it's still hot. And there are these girls selling lemonade, and the neighbor is sick of them, blocking her driveway and having all these kids around the yard. So she calls the cops. Troy walks up. Everybody knows Troy. He's a local news guy, handsome guy, Mr. Charming. Turns into a great segment. This also happened. This was also a news story completely unrelated to a magic watch. But those were two stories that Joel had sent me that I thought, well, these feel like a story. Nothing happens for a few days. Joel is kind of feeling like maybe I made that up. I kind of like when a character doubts himself, like if something fantastic happens, because I believe we all run into little magical consciousness field sparkles throughout our lives, and object permanence, things like that are not as solid as we want to think they are, I think, or we affect it. It's kind of however, it's ineffable. It's an ineffable explanation. But he's thinking maybe this didn't even happen. Joel has a habit on Saturday. He's living with a girl, and I tell the story of how they met. But it's told in third person narrative, and in the screenplay, it's going to have to be a scene. You know what I mean? So that's going to be a fun thing of the difference between showing and telling in prose and showing and telling in a screenplay. Because you really don't tell much in a screenplay, you just show everything. And in a script, you can tell more than people will want to hear. People will say, oh, you show but don't tell. I'm like, that doesn't mean you have to break it down to everything as a description. And so he leaves on Saturday, and as he's on Saturday to go do his running around town, drinking coffee, going to half price books, all the kind of stuff you do when you're in your 20s and you have 12 roommates and you just need to get away from everybody. So you go out and you run around. You only have $5 for the whole day. He still has the habit of doing that as his sense of his personality, but he's starting to think maybe he's outgrowing it because he's living with a woman, and it's the first time he's ever lived with anybody. But now that his friend is getting, he knows that his friend is going to get promoted to the morning show or something. He out of town in New York or anywhere, because the Lemonade story made the national wire. So he got two stories out on the national wire in a week. And Joel's like, okay, he's about to get poached. Like he's getting calls. He's guest hosting and stuff like that. So he suddenly has this. This is where we go with the internal struggle. He suddenly has an abandonment fear. He's never lived with a woman. He's going to lose another guy that he's got really good chemistry with. And he has this abandonment fear, which makes him kind of close off and stick with his Saturday routine of can't get too close, can't get too close. And his watch, he's kind of thinking about all this stuff. And then his watch says pawn. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go to the pawn shop. So he goes to a pawn shop. He goes in. He's a regular at this pawn shop. He goes in and he is just milling around, and then he sees a music stand that is like an industrial grade, institutional grade music stand with a big 8-pound bass, the kind of stand you could put you could put a Gutenberg Bible on it and you wouldn't worry that it's going to tip over. And he's like, I used to have one of these. One of my roommates walked off with it, and I'm so happy to get this thing. And he picks it up, and he's carrying it, and he walks up to the counter. And as he's approaching the counter, he realizes he's walking up on an armed robbery. There's a dude holding a gun on Chandru, the Cash US employee, and he walks up, and the guy is so focused on Chandru that he doesn't see him approaching, and he's kind of got a newsman's idea on it, like he doesn't feel like he's really in it. He feels like he's just filming it, even though he's not filming anything. And then he gets close enough, and the watch buzzes, which it had never buzzed before. It buzzes, and the guy turns and he fires he shoots his gun on accident, and it shatters a mirror behind the guy behind the counter. And as he's startled by the watch, and Joel, before the guy can shoot again, Joel swings the music stand and smashes the guy in the head with the bass, and kind of knocks him onto the counter where he breaks the glass, and he hits him again with the music stand. And by now Chandru has picked up a bat, and he's wailing on the guy. And finally the guy's on the floor, and he pukes. He's having a concussion. They get the gun out of his hand. Cut to the police are there. They give their statements. Chandru's trying to clean up the puke, and they deal with the cops for just very briefly, come in late, get out early on that kind of a scene. And then Joel's sitting in his car, in his little pickup, and he's going, wow, did that even really happen? Like I didn't film it. I'm not sure that even happened, And then he suddenly goes, oh, shit, I forgot about the music stand. So he goes in, the cops are gone, the guy's gone. He goes in, and Chandra is still cleaning up. And he says, hey, and the stand is sitting right there on the wet floor where he had left it, and the floor is wet from being mopped. And he says, hey, can I still buy that? And Chandru says, oh, come on in, Mr. Joel. And he comes in, and he looks, and Chandru has taken all these engagement and wedding rings out from the broken counter, where so they've got glass inside of them, and he has taken those, and he's trying to clean up the shattered glass from the incident. And Joel suddenly sees all these engagement rings, and he's just like looking at them, and his watch buzzes again, and he looks down, and it says yes. So he says, hey, Chandru, let me take a look at these engagement rings. And that's where we end the story, is Joel is letting go of his fear of abandonment, and making that next step for growth. It's a 14-page story. I've always been really happy with the plot because you kind of have everything. You've got a cosmic event, and then you have decisions, and then you have a weird little mystery, and then at the end you have growth. Your character gets what he wants and he gets what he needs. Makes for a positive story to me. If your character doesn't get what he needs, is that satisfying to the audience? We'll get to that when we start talking about the Hart Chart. Now, it's going to be fun to adapt this. I've already taken a couple of swipes at it, of taking notes from it, but I haven't really dug into it because I really wanted to save that as a shared experience. What we're going to do is now I would like to, you got anything to add to that, Kyle?
No,
I
that's
mean,
how I remember it.
okay. What did you think? I mean, does the story work for you?
No, I think yeah, it works great for what we're trying to do. The remind me and anybody watching, this is going to be a 30-minute format.
It's going to be a 30-minute, yeah, it'll be a half hour. So 14 page, I can adapt it to a 30-page screenplay. And we're writing it as an episode of an anthology sci-fi light show like Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. Now, I wrote this story as a uh, story, but the whole time I wrote it, I really was like thinking of it visually. I didn't know anything about screenwriting yet. I had never even taken a crack at writing a script at this point. But I still wrote it. My secret dream of writing my Army memoir stories and then even writing this was I'm going to get good enough that somebody's going to want to adapt my stories. Like, I didn't want to admit that the goal was not to get published. The goal was to have somebody else take it from me and make something out of it. And then I, learned screenwriting, and it was like, well, cut out the middleman. Let me figure out how to make it presentable. So, and I mean that presentable. Presentable is the word, and that has a lot to do with formatting, uh, which
Well,
will.
and even I, a little aside, but I once attended a Navy reunion with a relative because I was like, oh, Navy stories, like I'll be able to hear all this cool stuff. And I just found out all these guys' view on like politics and trans kids. Like they're they probably had great stories in there, but zero presentation.
Well, you know what's funny that you would say that is I was in the Army for 7 years, and I only spent 2 years in the Pershing in the nuclear missile unit, and those are the only times that I have any stories. But for what it's worth,
Hmm.
we were when we were on where the live missiles are, set up 24/7, that was called a combat alert site. And prior to budget cuts, we actually got combat pay for those 3 months. We always had live rounds. We always had our gas mask. It was as if the enemy was just on the other side of the barbed wire.
Hmm.
And in a sense, they were because we were far more under threat of a terrorist attack than we were of an army invading, unless they were to, just bring in planes or anything. Well, we were not in peril of a ground army invading. Let's put it that way. But we were
My
definitely
uncle
a target.
My uncle was on a nuclear sub during that time, and the way he described it is that you essentially had four subs. You had the Russian sub with the missiles that could bomb us, and you had the American sub with the missiles that could bomb them. Then you had the American sub following the Russian sub, and a Russian sub following the American sub to make sure. And you just had these four submarines just kind of doing figure eights that whole time, waiting for the call.
Good Lord, like a mile underwater, just with in a tube with a bunch of dudes eating canned food.
We wouldn't have been there. We're too tall.
Oh my God, you're not kidding. My stepfather was a retired Navy, and when I joined the Army, he said, Navy uniforms are better. I said, yeah, the Navy portholes are pretty damn short. He was like 5'7". Like I butt my head in a house, like I'm not doing. I'm 6'4", and Kyle's pretty much the same, right? We're
6'3".
6'3". Yeah, we're
I'm as tall as Tom Cruise says he is.
I'm 2 inches taller than Reacher.
Ooh, that's
That's called
intense.
that's called camera angles. Yeah, I was shocked to read he was 6'2", and I might not be quite 6'4", but I'm close enough. Um, so yeah, that's the thing that I found is that the military stories, unless there's a war going on, nobody cares. Like nobody cares. And so what happened was I had written these stories for this is an aside, but it was kind of a revelation, and it was part of my deciding to choose to pursue the MFA program. Um, for my senior thesis, I'd been writing these stories for 15 years, writing and rewriting. I wrote these stories so many times, the stories were bored with me. You know what I'm saying? Like the stories were like, I'm not doing this again. I just don't have any new perspective on this. It's on you just not being very good at writing about me at this point. You'll get that. You will get that. Learn to recognize that when your story is bored with you. It means you have homework to do on what you're doing. Don't feel like the goddamn story isn't working for me. It's you that's not working for the story because the story doesn't even exist until you nail it. So when it came time for my senior thesis, we had to write. We had to do whatever we did for 4 credit hours to graduate. Um, we had to use our consciousness training and education and the society or um, all the TM stuff. Let's just put it all the academic angle of how TM is used in academia at Maharishi University, accredited university, by the way. Just so you know, this isn't some made up thing. It's not a trade school. My MFA and my undergrad are both accredited. They're real schools. Um, we had to come up with something. And when I enrolled in school, I learned the a real deep understanding of archetypes and myth, Jungian archetypes and Joseph Campbell and storytelling in ways that I hadn't understood before, different types of stories, different types of writing. And so what I decided to do for my senior project, because I felt I wrote these stories over and over trying to find a thread, but I could never connect them. I could never, and I had a good 12 to 15 story ideas, many of them hashed out, many of them abandoned, um, that had been repeated. I literally went through a complete case of, a big cardboard box of printer paper of printing these stories out and editing them by hand over the years. Uh, can't even tell you how many millions of words, but I could never tie them together in a way that had forward momentum. And the problem is there's no forward momentum when you're in the service and there's not a war going on. You're not advancing. You're always in the same place, and you arrive in the middle of everybody else's story and they leave in the middle of yours. You're just always, it's a turnover of people, and that could be an element of a story, but it's not a story in and of itself. So you make friends with somebody and then they're gone. When I was in the thinking about how to use these stories, so my deal was I can't tell a fictional story if I can't tell a true story. I can't move on as a writer because I had fallen in love with writing, and I had taken um, memoir writing workshops, and I had even had a mentor from the American Writers Program, a woman out of New York, mentored me for 4 months as I tried to put these stories into a finished product. And then we ran out of time, and I looked at everything, and that was when I realized I'm not qualified for this. I don't know. I've autodidact, self-taught, taken myself as far as I could. And I could take the snapshot, i.e., a painting of a scene, but a narrative, even a comic book narrative, I wasn't capable of doing that on my own. And it was that moment, if you remember that Simpsons when in the early Simpsons when Bart was going to fail, and then they had the snow day, and he was like, "Yay, I can skip, I can skip studying." And then at least it's like, if you fail, if you don't, it's the snow day episode of The Simpsons. And then when he fails the test and he just says, "I'm dumb." That hit me so hard. And this was even before I got all into it, but it still hits me hard. Is that's how I felt when that 4 months was over, because I worked with this woman named Pat Willard. She's written books about Depression era cooking. She's well known in her field, and she was super helpful, hugely helpful. But the fact was, she couldn't do it for me, And I had this. If I work with her, I'm gonna figure out how to do this because she knows how to do it, and she'll talk me through it. Well, she couldn't. That's not how it works. You have to learn it yourself. And when it was all over, and then I kind of followed up on her notes and I assembled everything and I looked at it and I'm like, it still doesn't work because I'm dumb. I just don't know enough. And then COVID happened, and I said, you know what? While everybody's, locked in, I'm gonna continue my education. And my kids were grown, and my son had graduated high school the year before. None of my kids wanted to go to college, so I was like, well, then I will. I'll spend that college money on myself. And I only needed the 3 semesters to graduate from. I had been practicing TM for about 3 years at that point, and I said, well, I only need 3 semesters. I got evaluated, 5 different transcripts from City College of Chicago, different transcripts from when I was in active duty. And I was taking college classes back then, and most of them were art. They didn't take all of them. A lot of them were painting at Austin Community College. And I got accepted. I was very intimidated anyway. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I imagine that. So for my senior thesis, I took 4 stories that had a kind of a story and a subtext story, and I found quotes from Carl Jung or an archetype quote, or a um, uh, William Campbell, The Hero's Journey, or Robert Bly, also a Hero's Journey, or any number of people. It wasn't just men. But I found a quote from somebody that kind of lined up with what was happening in the story. It might just be a kind of a summary of what an anima does or what a shadow does. I took the stories. I selected these 4 stories because they were my encounters with Jungian archetypes. My drill sergeants were personas. My Yugoslavian girlfriend was an anima. A guy I almost shot on guard duty was a shadow. It was like 2 hard heads butting up against each other, and I was in the right, and he was completely. It would have been justified if I would have shot him, but I'm really glad that I didn't. It would have ruined my life forever. But it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal. It would have been on the news that somebody got shot on a missile base. That would have been a pretty big deal. Would have been an end of career for a few people, I think. That things went that far. But he was where he wasn't supposed to be. Anyway, and Animal Familiar, we had the nose cones of the missiles where the warhead is. It snowed, man. It was called the Cold War for a reason. And snow did not accumulate on those warheads, which meant that there was a little bit of radiation keeping those things warm. The rest of the body, the 40-foot body of the rocket would have snow. You know how snow condenses, and it just stacks up straight where that would happen. They'd have to come brush that off every morning. But the warhead, nope, there was no snow on that. It was dry too. It wasn't even wet. It was like dry. We had a raven, a big European raven, one of those like beefeater ravens, like in the Tower of London, those big, like an old man with hairy nostrils, like that feather sticking out of their nose. And their beaks were pretty much that big. We had this one, the guards would smuggle cookies down. That's what was my job. I was just a guard. They would smuggle cookies down on pad and eat them because it'd be the middle of the night. Or this bird, we would feed them to the birds. We'd throw them out for the birds. Totally not allowed. Not even taking the cookies was not allowed. Um, Throw cookies out to the birds. And this one, it was just like that Daffy Duck cartoon. This where he moves into Elmer Fudd's house over the winter because he doesn't feel like migrating. This one raven, we looked up one day and he was the only one left. And their footprints were like this big in the snow. When you'd see their footprints in the snow, it was like those little spitter guys from Jurassic Park. It was like, what kind of demon is running around here? They were so evil looking, you know? I mean, he was like a weird chicken size, but different dimensions. You know, these birds were big. And so he stuck around and kind of became our mascot. And then winter really blew in, like it got super cold. And we noticed that he was sleeping up on the warheads. And then we rotated out, right? We're gone for about 6 or 8 months, come back, and that stupid bird is still there, only by now he has radiation poisoning and the feathers are falling out of him. He was there the whole 2 years I was. Actually, he got there before me. By the time I saw him, he wasn't flying anywhere. Everybody else considered him we called him Charlie, and everybody considered him their mascot. And I was like, no, man, that's my shadow. You know, that is what turns out more of an animal familiar. But it was like, that guy is my x-ray. Like, we're soaking all this shit up too, man. You know, this is a light-hearted, too bad. You're also, when you're in the Army, you really are kind of cold-blooded about shit like that. You know, like, stupid bird, look at him rot. And so this bird was this weird little golem. You know, he was a golem who hopped around and ate out of the dumpster, and he could hop over a fence, but he couldn't fly. He had like a couple of tail feathers, he had a couple of wing feathers, but the rest of him had pretty much been plucked. And it was just this ugly, smudgy gray skin and a face that said, fuck you, man. He was so unhappy with his life's choices. So that was so he kind of floats through all of the stories. So those were the 4 stories. And then I opened and closed each story with a quote from Carl Jung or a quote from Joseph Campbell, or like I said before, somebody else that would talk, you know, talking about a hero's journey or Jungian archetypes, or you know, something, tricksters. A quote from a guy that I admired greatly who ran a website called Academic. He wrote, he just compared tricksters in movies in one of his blog posts. And I realized that this German biker that I hung out with was a bit of a trickster. He was my friend, but he was a trickster. And so I kind of figured out who these archetypes were, which made me understand in the writing is dangerous subcategory of why is writing dangerous, made me understand why 30 years later, these stories were my only Army stories. You know, they were the only ones because I ran into all of these. I was on a hero's journey and I ran into all these different archetypes. I just didn't know how to articulate that to myself at the time. So when I put them into this document, which came to 80 pages, my advisor, when I told him what I wanted to do, he said, and fortunately, he had been my archetype teacher as well, so I didn't have to reinvent the wheel to explain it to him. He said, well, how long do you want this to be? And I said, I can probably bring it in at 100 pages. And he said, yeah, they're usually 10. So I talked him into 80. So I had 4 roughly 20-page sections. And when I read it back to myself, having Carl Jung introduce this situation, introduce the pros regarding tricksters or whoever, tricksters and personas and anima. When I read it with those introductions, suddenly it was like having Rod Serling introduce a Twilight Zone episode and close it out. And I went, oh my God, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be. Like it really put context into it put context instead of forward momentum. Like there was a good trade-off as to why these stories work as stories. They don't have to lead into each other in a timeline way. They just lead into each other in a context appreciation way and go from beginning to end. Like the beginning to end, the time involved is not as important as the events that happen within the time because I could mix those around and still end up at the same point. So I still start with basic training and end with the night before I left Germany in four big stories that kind of have self-reflection in each other. And when I read that and it had this Rod Serling vibe, I just went, oh, okay, I'm going to apply for that MFA program. That was the thing that made me go, okay, I can tell, I get it. I proved something to myself, or I understood something as a surprise. I did not see that happening when I was writing them. And it's really good when you can surprise yourself with your writing. That's the goal, is that your writing takes on a life of its own and sneaks up on you and gooses you in the ribs when you're reading it. When your words can make the hair on your neck stand up, you're doing something good. Or you can make yourself cry and you already know what you wrote. You're familiar with that, and you hit a point where you're like, oh my God, like I really nailed this girl, I really, or I really got to the root of what that relationship was about, why that guy is still important to me, even though he's dead, like the different things. So, so that was a big deal. That's kind of my origin story into reaching into screenwriting. And then it became, well, hell yeah, I'm up for David Lynch. I'm not intimidated to take a program with David Lynch's name on it. That's it's not just me being a fan trying to have the ultimate souvenir of a diploma. It was like, no, this is a guy I want to learn from because this is a guy I've been learning from all along, just passively. So, anyway, let me get a drink of water.
I
Well,
also just, if I could say another thing about David Lynch, the thing that I find most fascinating about your experience and what I've learned about him is how TM has been part of his process. He has a charity where he raises money to get underage youth or like at-risk youth, what they need to learn TM. And outside of David Lynch, you just look at the people that have been using it. Seinfeld, Rick Rubin, the Beatles. It's like these aren't, mid-level. These are like the top guys in what they do, and it's an amazing tool for not just accessing creativity but also energy. And not. I guess I'm not an expert, so I'm a little hesitant to like kind of dive in, but that is something that has been just really fascinating to me and an interesting part of this process.
well, glad you brought that up, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but yeah, the David Lynch Foundation, and is run by a guy named Bob Roth. And one of the things about the David Lynch Foundation is they offer, yes, at-risk youth, PTSD firefighters, PTSD soldiers, and they offer scholarships for, and they do this globally, by the way, and they offer scholarships to people that can't afford it because it's not cheap, but there's no substitute. So if you read on Reddit and somebody says these are the mantras, all you got to do is sit down and say the mantras. No, that's not true. You might get something out of that, but you're not going to get what you should get in stilling the mind and descending and expanding. And there are lots of videos that can go into that. There are a lot of cynics about TM because people look at it as secretive and cultish, and because they're on the outside. If you're inside it, it doesn't feel cultish at all, and it does. There are people that take it a lot more, gospel-y than I do, but it's not a religion. It is a mental exercise that will build your mental strength. is the easiest way I can say it. And as far as the expense, well, so is a gym membership, so is a personal trainer. It's something, and a lot of people get offended that it costs money to take this program. People get offended by that and they say that it should be free. And I'm like, well, there's plenty of stuff that's free. You just are mad because the one you want actually costs money. Like that's such a, and then they'll go, oh, it's a ripoff. I'm like, well, you don't even know what it is. Because if you tell me what you think it is, I can tell you straight up, that's not what it is because nobody gets it right. Like I see people on Reddit all the time. I do a lot of Reddit skimming, and I'll talk about Reddit screenwriting stuff a lot. The questions I see on Reddit and comments that I get on Reddit, comments that I read on Reddit. And I'm not a big Redditor. I just kind of think it's a good way of gauging what questions are floating around out there, what people are talking about. Kind of surprises me how many people have a lot of insight, have a lot to offer, and how many people are just rude and stupid and don't have anything to offer and are resentful about it. So,
Yeah.
kind of like the rest of the world, right? So my interest in taking transcendental meditation, learning transcendental meditation. Again, I just thought David Lynch is going to David Lynch. He was a clear genius from out of the gate. Like, so The Elephant Man was the first David Lynch movie I saw. It came out, I think, my junior year of high school. And seeing that movie without having seen Eraserhead, because I was in the days of midnight movies, and those they weren't like Rocky Horror. The midnight movies were in circulation, and if you didn't see it, it wasn't going to be there the next weekend for the most part. So pre VCR and all that. Yeah, I'm old. My interest in TM was because of Howard Stern, because he talks about doing TM, but he didn't seem particularly.
Another guy who was the top of his field.
He's at the top of a field that nobody knew had a top of a field. Like my fascination with Howard Stern, I found him extremely entertaining, for one. But my fascination was with who knew we needed a number one morning DJ in the country? Like every town had 4 or 5 teams of DJs,
Welcome to the Zoo Crew.
Exactly. They had a template, Some of them played music, but it was the same basic gist, a soundboard guy, somebody with the news or the sports, and and then the goofball in the middle who's just trying to make you get to work in a good mood, kind of a thing. And the fact that he was able to go from just being a normal old morning DJ to the king of all media, as he called himself, that was real. I mean, how many DJs get movies made about them where they get to play themselves and they're huge hits, and have Allison Janney in the cast, so he kind of fascinated me. And I looked into TM, and it just seemed a little expensive. At the time, it was close to $1,000, which was just kind of out of the realm of my imagination. Like that just seems like a lot for one weekend of training. And the guy I was talking to on the phone said, well, you said you were in the Army. And by the way, by the time I had gotten to this point, I had lived in India for 2.5 years. I had done yoga. I'd been to Dharamsala and seen the Dalai Lama in his home monastery. I'd studied Buddhism. I'd gotten sober. I had really tried hard to find some kind of inner peace, and something that Buddhism and just guided meditation and Eckhart Tolle is a really great guy. If you're on the fence about what it's like to change the way you think, check out Eckhart Tolle. Listen to Eckhart Tolle. He really kind of lays out the traps that we've set for ourselves growing up that we think that we're still in, and you don't have to think the way you always thought. And I know I'm really rambling here, listeners, but we'll get there. I think this is part of introductions and explanations, or introductions and definitions.
Eckhart Tolle is Kendrick Lamar's guy, if you're a big
Oh,
fan of him, or just pay attention to the impact that Kendrick Lamar has had on this country over the past year.
exactly, exactly. It's like, okay, somebody is getting, if somebody's going to vouch for somebody and you go, wow, I've never heard of this guy, but I sure heard of you, pay attention to that. So this guy told me, the guy I was talking to on the phone, he said, "Well, you were in the army. You're eligible for a David Lynch Foundation. If They didn't even need any kind of paperwork to prove I was a vet, but he said you're eligible for a David Lynch Foundation scholarship, which cut a third of the cost, and that made it reasonable." And it made me think, God damn, David Lynch is even cooler than I thought. You know what I mean? I was like, right on. And so I took it. And I had this is a double-sided sword. I had a heart attack at the beginning of 2020 and almost died, but I survived. And then I started school in September. And then a year, 2 years later, when I had my first Zoom call with David Lynch, the way we did those was it was very Oz the Great and Powerful. David Lynch was on a big screen, and it was a residency week. You have a week in Iowa where everybody meets, gets together, and then the rest of it is distance learning. And then the following summer you have another residency week. And in the winter you have a Zoom residency because nobody wants to go to Iowa in January for a week. So it was like an 8 or a 9 to 5 Zoom residency week. A lot of fantastic. I can't say enough good things about the David Lynch Graduate School. A lot of really fantastic teachers and guests. Really, really cool guests, directors and producers. So David Lynch comes on. One of our teachers who was also the TM teacher was his documentarian. So if you see David Lynch David Lynch on tour, and there are a lot of videos of David Lynch talking about TM. One of my teachers, Amin Kudir, was his documentary maker, and so David, they have this. You can't talk about David Lynch without talking like David Lynch, and that's kind of universal. It doesn't matter the teachers, whatever. It's not like you're making fun of him. You're just kind of in it. Because he really talks like that all the time. There was nothing being a put on about that man. And I saw him a couple of times live. I saw him in Poland at his art show retrospective, and I saw him in Los Angeles at the Festival of Disruption. So I feel very fortunate to have actually seen him in person. But I got to talk to him 4 times on Zoom. And I was a nervous wreck. We all were. What we did was there was one chair in front of a camera and then the screen behind him, and then we would just kind of scoot over until it was our turn to be in the chair. And there were about 17 of us students, but even the teachers would come in, to get their chance to talk to David Lynch. It really was like the king is here, like everybody wanted one more chance to just say hello to David Lynch again. So I'm sitting in the front row. I'm in the chair finally, and David Lynch comes on, and I had no idea what I was even going to tell him, or ask him. I was really starstruck, and everybody was, and he knew it. He would be like, "So, where are you from?" "Oh, my mom's from Brooklyn." Kind of he kind of would lead the thing, and it was my turn, and I told him about that I had taken transcendental meditation because of him. That I didn't take it to be a fanboy of his, but I wouldn't have taken it without the David Lynch Foundation scholarship, and that I had just had a heart attack 2 years earlier, and I stand by this to this day. I would not have recovered from that heart attack the way I have had I not had my transcendental meditation practice. And I told him that, and I said, I feel like I owe you my life, in basic black and white terms. Had I not taken that course, or had I not learned TM and incorporated TM into my life, I would not have survived that heart attack, and I would not have recovered where I am. And I said, so I just want to thank you for that, and I am not exaggerating. And he said, "You got it, buddy." He was so like, "All right, you got it, buddy." So yeah, he's a pretty much I'm grateful every moment that that guy. There are angels among us, and he was one of them. And I'm glad that I'm in that I'm more than a fan now. You know what I mean? There was only by the time he passed away, there was only about 100 graduates of the whole program because the school's relatively new. Um, so where was that going? Where was I'm kind of floundering all of a sudden. Uh, I did ask him stuff
Well,
like, hmm?
I probably a great time to mention like this isn't a podcast or a entertainment program by any means. This is a writing lab, workshop, I guess, if you want to call it. You know, I'm here mostly to learn. I think you are going to be teaching me quite a bit, and hopefully, viewers of this program will be able to kind of learn through me as a surrogate. And then with the goal of actually writing something and showing, it's not this like, oh, I'm a good writer. I'm going to sit down one weekend at an Airbnb and knock out the great American story. Like we're going to get into the nitty gritty and the uncomfortable, the danger of writing. Um, and yeah, so if the rambling is a little off-putting, maybe get comfortable with that fast forward button.
Right, but also learn to think in layers. That's the thing that you learn as you write is that if you think in layers, your points will cross each other. You don't have to go looking for the next point. Your points are all, atoms. They're all floating around, and thoughts are real things. Thoughts are electricity in the unified field. And
hmm Well,
so
I want you to be able to finish what you were saying about David Lynch and TM, but just keeping an eye on time. I'd love to touch on the Hart Chart
yeah.
before we go out today. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much, Kyle. Yeah, I knew that the first episode was going to be a whole lot of kind of prep because I don't want to have to reintroduce thoughts down the line. So this is a kind of yes, thank you for bringing up. This is not a podcast of opinions. This is a lab of creation. And who am I to teach or who am I to guide this? A Master of Fine Arts in Screenwriting is a terminal degree. I never realized it at the time, but I am qualified to teach screenwriting on a college level. So this is a college level writing lab for free. This is for you. We're doing this for you. And I hope, my hope is that you have a story or you can come up with a story or you have an idea for a story and that what we talk about will trigger you to creating it. Creation, again, is not throwing paint at a canvas. Creation in writing is a lot of journaling. That's the throwing the paint at the canvas. Journal on whatever it is that your story is or your characters are. Just spend 20 minutes a day for a few weeks scribbling out what you want your character to do. And then cut through all that and find your story outline. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. It doesn't have to have a lot of subtext, but have your beginning, middle, and end outline. So many people say, I have a movie idea, and they just start writing, and then they write into Reddit and go, I don't know, man, second act. I got that second act stall, and now I have writer's block. And it's like, neither of those exist. Those are you romanticizing what writing is supposed to be. The second act stall is because you didn't outline. So, one of my great teachers was a man by the name of J.V. Hart, James V. Hart, screenwriting legend. He's been working in the movies since the early 70s. He's probably written one of your favorite movies in that he wrote Hook, he wrote Contact, he worked with Carl Sagan for 8 years on the script of Contact. He wrote
Wow, that's
Bram
cool.
Stoker's Dracula. He wrote August Rush, a couple of TV shows, Muppet Treasure Island. He was the one who was able to make a story out of Muppet Treasure Island. I just recently watched that movie, and I'm going, okay, Muppet Writer, Muppet Writer. Oh, there he is. This is JV Hart part. Like you can just tell. And Also, one of the nicest people you could ever meet. And he, after Bram Stoker's Dracula, after they had filmed it and they had put it together, it just didn't work. And Francis Coppola called him to San Francisco. He flies into San Francisco. They watch the movie, and he's like, "What's not working here?" And he's going, "I don't know. You're right. Something's not working here." So they rewrote the script of the existing footage so that they could re-edit. That's the deal with a script. A script is never finished until the movie is on the projector, not even in the can, until it's released and in the projector. Uh, and they went over the questions of what's missing from these characters. And from that night of brainstorming and note taking and rewriting, J.V. Hart came up with the Hart Chart, which is a series of questions about your characters, because your story should be character driven. Everything needs to be character driven, because even though you think you're going there to watch the lightsaber or the moonstones or whatever, you're really there to see, look how much outrage happens when somebody is miscast, in a movie, like the people are just so attached to. It's like those characters are who they care about. The story almost always doesn't even make sense in these big giant movies.
Another way you could say that is guarantee your favorite movie is character driven, or your
Exactly.
favorite films are character driven.
So JV, that is a really, really good way of saying it. So JV came up with the Hart Chart, and he taught us he in my second residency. He taught us the Hart Chart, and it was mind blowing how simple. You didn't get away with writing less, but it makes everything you write productive. And it's a series of questions that will lead you to understand your character and to author your story, because you are the authority on everything that happens in your screenplay. So,
Something I'd like to add before you continue. Your credentials are very impressive, but I think one of the things I find so validating about working with you on this is that you're practiced. Like, you are pretty fresh out of this program, and you haven't taken that big gap that I feel like a lot of people take and are coming back to this. Like, you're still hot. And that makes this a really great time to learn this process from you.
well, I'm going to go ahead. Thank you so much. Since graduating, I use Grammarly. I love Grammarly. Um, it's one of the most useful tools I've ever encountered. It keeps track of your word count. I'm not here to plug Grammarly, but it keeps track of your word count. And on the 1 year anniversary of graduating, I got my Grammarly stats. And after graduation, I had written 1.2 million words. So that's a lot. So
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't tell him,
normally
like,
internet troll numbers.
right? Like, how am I gonna get that many viewers?
Johnny, you leading a double life over there?
Well, what's funny is I'll get a Grammarly update, and it'll be like, "You're burning it up, bro. You're more than 99% of our users." I'm like, I only wrote 48 words last week. Are people just not as engaged? They bought it and then kind of slacked off of it. Um, I love writing. You have to fall in love with writing. You have to fall in love with the downsides of writing. You got to fall in love with the danger. You got to fall in love with the pain, because the pain and the danger is what makes the reward so sweet. When you write something that makes you happy and you go, I did it. I got it. I understand. Even if it's first draft and you know it's going to have to be polished, there's just something so satisfying about putting something out there for other people to see in and to connect with their imaginations. Unlike a painting, every form of art, you have to meet the artist, and the art and the viewer have to meet each other halfway, right? But with a screenplay, you got to kind of, it's a 90-10 that flips back and forth. You take to a movie what you already have your presuppositions and your expectations. And even if you don't know that it's a good, watching a movie is dangerous. You can get just you can just lose it. I watched last night. We went to see the Broadway version of The Outsiders, and I was crying like a baby. I read that book in the eighth grade, and that Broadway version, again, adaptations. That adaptation nailed everything so well. It was like this is a top notch. I have a new favorite musical now. So I'm gonna go to share screen and hold on. Keep talking, Kyle, while I figure out what I'm doing here.
So as you can tell, our primary expertise is in technical field and operating, computers and live streams and this or that. This episode you will have been posted after the fact. I mean, we are doing this live. Obviously, there's no break in the conversation, but the goal moving forward is a weekly live stream where it's not edited, it's not watered down, it's dangerous. And yeah, part of the dangerous is looking a little silly at times, but I also feel like that's where the learning comes in. Dare I say, the magic. Um,
Uh,
Ta-da!
all right. So before,
My
okay,
groaning gonna want some kickback for that transcendent Homer you got there in the corner.
um, I just had it a minute. Dang it.
Yep.
Am I still shared?
Did
Is the screen up?
you are still shared, but your screen is down. Is that an app you have pulled up or your web browser?
It's on my browser.
There
There
you
it is.
go.
Okay. I can't, for some reason, I can't have both of us in the window. So I don't have the
That's
window
fine.
with us. Okay. So let me go to the beginning of the Hart chart. Okay. Let me, core questions. Getting started writing by J.V. Hart, writer of Hook, Contact, and Dracula. The following questions are the three kings of storytelling, in my opinion. I believe you must answer the first three questions before you can even think of writing a script. This is so important. Don't even think about it if you can't answer these questions. You're not ready. Francis Ford Coppola gave me this exercise a year after we had completed working together on Dracula. I've used it ever since. I use it every day in my writing. If you can answer these three questions, you're ready to proceed to the next step in preparing your script. Characters. So I'm going to go to Joel, the three questions. Okay. Get ready to meet the one and only.
What does my main character want when we meet them? What is it that they want? This is usually ego driven. I, me. That want is called a desire line, and it will pull your character through the narrative, but you must know what they want.
Did you get that? You have to know what your character wants. You know what the great example that JV uses is Get Out. Kyle, what did I don't know his name, but what did the protagonist of Get Out, what did he want? What started this story? What was the one thing that he wanted that started the story that becomes Get Out?
Apologies if I have two answers here. I'm sure one of them's correct, though. It was either to make a good impression on the girlfriend's parents or to appease the girlfriend by being at least presentable to her family.
What if I tell you you're both
Mm.
wrong?
Ooh.
You know what he wanted? Think about it.
What?
He wanted to quit smoking,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, totally forgot about that.
right? Because it's small.
Yeah.
You think that everything is climbing a mountain, but no, he wanted to quit smoking. And she says, he's saying, no, no, no. And she says, she can help you quit smoking. And he's like, okay. Like that's the thing. He wanted to quit smoking. It's that simple. What does your character want? And I so what I
That
wrote about,
is way better answer. Now
isn't
that I
that
think about it.
crazy? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody in our class figured that out, and I've heard him give this class at Austin Film Festival twice, and in a whole, conference room full of attendees, that's always his go-to one is what did the guy want in Get Out? And everybody always gives the same answer that you did. Like he wanted his girlfriend to get off his back. He wanted he wanted to make a good impression. Nope, he wanted to quit smoking, and that's why he went. So that was what he was going to gain from it. So in so that's question number one. Question number two, what are the characters' relationships like, and what are the obstacles the main characters must encounter and overcome in order to get what they want?
Who are the relationships and what are the obstacles my main character has to encounter to get what they want? And you make a list of these. People, places, things, objects, monsters, creatures, earthquakes. What are the obstacles? You must write those down so you understand what they're up against.
See, this is where the journaling comes in. This is where you consider these questions. And I recommend, I mean, yeah, you can do them on the Hart Chart. Now, the Hart Chart is a subscription service. It's not expensive. I don't want to tell you the numbers, but it's worth the, whatever it is. It's a super useful tool, and you will fall in love with it if you just use it. Don't just if you subscribe, don't get it and don't use it. Don't think that you learn the lessons from the demonstration. Follow the advice and answer these questions. And this is where journaling comes in. You can kind of workshop what's going on with those different characters and what is going to be the problem. What I'm trying to drive home is everything is methodical. Everything has to be dealt with in order. Even if you don't know the order yet, but you have to find the order before you start making it into a screenplay, because it's so easy to look up from your pages and go, I don't know how to get him out of this room. I don't even remember how he ended in this room.
In the end, does my main character get what they want or not get what they want? And is it good or bad for them if they did or didn't? Now put in parentheses, did my main character get what they need? Need and want are two different things. Want is about ego. One is about I. Need is something you bury inside that you discover by pursuing what you want.
And let me tell you, that's where the title Writing is Dangerous comes from. Because if you've got a story in mind, it's because you got something on your mind. And are you going to get what you need by the end of this story? Will it help you figure out, will writing this story help you figure out how to get what you need? Pay attention. Pay attention and realize it's dangerous because it hurts. It's dangerous because you have to evaluate things. Now, here are the bonus questions. Why does the audience care?
Most important, why do we care? Why am I going to sit with your character for the next week or hours or binge watch your TV show about your character? What is it about your character that's so important and so compelling for me to want to watch? That's a tough one, and you must figure it out. Empathy. Why do I empathize with your character?
Is your character a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he a protagonist? Is he an antagonist? Everybody is a protagonist in their own story, even if they know they're being a jerk. So, do you have to like them or do you have to care? There's a big difference. You don't have to like Dracula, but for some reason you're always on his side. You know, uh, there's just something to that. That you have to empathize with your character. That's part of what I was saying about that sergeant. That I had written him as just a big cartoon bad guy, and that's not fair to either of us because I don't understand the story if he's just a big, I was bigger than him. That was
Ludo.
part of our conflict. That was I was taller than him. But that's the deal. Is you have to walk in your character's shoes, even if you don't like them and they're not the people you're rooting for. So what do my characters need? This is a big one.
By pursuing what your character wants, you discover what your character needs. So what is my character's need? What do they need? Need is something that's internal, buried inside them. They only discover that need by pursuing what they want. It leads us to that deep need that becomes exterior in the course of the journey. So figure out what your character needs.
And that is, they don't always know what they need. That's the, that's the big truth, is that your characters don't always know what they need, which means they don't always know why they're doing something, which is why I really don't like when people over explain the why, or when people even ask the why. If you haven't figured out watching the story, I really I hate to go back to David Lynch again, but when David Lynch talked about discussing his movie in an interview, and he said, the movie is the discussion. Keep that in mind too. If you haven't said everything in the movie, then you've left something out. If you have to explain your movie, don't explain your writing, present your writing. Does that make sense? Don't explain it. Don't spend the time going, well, he drank from his beer. He drank Heineken because his dad drank Heineken. Like nobody cares. Just show that he's drinking a beer. And this is one that I
Well
still
said.
wrestle with. I don't have this one, the why now. Why is this happening to the characters in the moment? I have, let's just watch.
Why now? Very important question to ask. Why now is this happening to my main character? Why not 100 years ago? Why not tomorrow? Why not yesterday? Why not 10 years ago? Why is the universe lined up so that my character is a candidate for this journey we're about to put them on? Very important you know why now.
This doesn't necessarily, this is subtext. This is where subtext comes in. You don't have to say, oh, well, because it happened because it was 3 o'clock and something happens every day at 3 o'clock. You just have to know it yourself as to what is this change that is coming over this character, because there has to be change by the end of the story, or it's really not a story. It's just a situation that kind of added up into a narrative. And you really want a story. You really want a problem to be solved or a journey to be completed. Which, by the way, there are only two stories: a hero's journey or a virgin's promise. You are either asking a question or you are launching an answer. You are either a boy leaves home or a stranger comes to town. And when I say a stranger comes to town, that doesn't mean a bad guy shows up. The stranger that comes to town could be cancer, it could be alcoholism, it could be strangers in animal masks breaking into your house. But you, as the protagonist, or your protagonist, is the only one in the town that has the answer to how to fight this battle. And that's what that means. Now, to me, there's a third category, and that's the Elvis movie, which is a guy is on a hero's journey and a stranger comes to town, and he's the guy who's got to fix it. That's how I always look at Elvis movies. I think they're very iconic and they don't get enough credit. I always feel that they are a guy who just got out of the army, which is how they were produced, who's maybe right now he's racing cars or he's diving for pearls or he's crop dusting, but he's not where he's headed. He's into some kind of side trip. These kind of things, that tends to be more of a sequel story. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Boop. This is the most important thing. This is subtext, and this is what's going to give your character life.
What is my main character's wound? What is the wound in them that's hidden that they don't want anybody to know about, they don't want to discuss? It's going to be healed as they pursue what they want. This wound is very important for you to know. And it's very important for your character to deny exists and to do everything they can to hide it.
And that is, again, why writing is dangerous. Because if you're going to write what you know, you're going to write about your own wounds. You might change it from polka dot to plaid, but it's still going to be the thing that you feel pain about and you're processing in this writing practice.
What is my main character's wound?
Oh.
What is the wound in them that's hidden that they don't want anybody to know about, they don't want to discuss? It's going to be healed as they pursue what they want. This wound is very important for you to know. And it's very important for your character to deny exists and to do everything they can to hide it.
The question's so nice, I played it twice.
Ah,
So fear, here we go. Danger.
What does my character fear? What are they afraid of? What is it that emotionally shuts them down and stops them breathing? And it can't be afraid of dying. That doesn't count. You must find out what your character's afraid of, what phobia they have, what deep inner fear they have, because you'll use that against them. Everybody will use that against them. Their nemesis, the villain, their lover, their whatever relationship they're in, know what their fear is, know what they're afraid of.
There you go. And now I think the most important part of a story, and it's something that I take a lot of pride in, and I feel like I learned it from the Twilight Zone and from Doonesbury Comics and from Peanuts for that matter, comic strips, is do you have a satisfying ending? I feel like I'm pretty good at putting a button on a scene. I don't brag about myself a lot, but that's something that I do have skill with. And I know it's because I grew up reading Doonesbury. There's always, you kind of have an idea of the scenario, and then you have the setup, and then you have the punchline, and then you have a moment to soak that in, and then you have a second punchline that delivers on your premise there.
The final question is, do I have a satisfying ending? Not a happy ending, not a sad ending, not a good ending, not a bad ending, not the right ending, wrong. Do I have a satisfying ending? Have I earned the ending that I've delivered to my audience? Does my audience feel complete? Do they feel satisfied? Do I have a satisfying ending?
So, how's that? Satisfying. You know what I mean? Like, did the story add up to someplace where there was some growth? Is it a tragedy? Then did it add up to things getting worse? Or, so let's start in with some notes that I made in advance of adapting the story. Here's the deal with the Hart Chart and with when you finish the Hart Chart, you will have your story outline. I keep my outline open, and my outline tends to be longer than my screenplay because I'll write it out after we get the characters down, then we'll get to the signposts, which are let's just go to them. Oh, nope, I can't do that. Okay, can't get there yet. I keep the outline open, and I'll take pieces of the script and tie it in to where it fits on the outline and kind of compare. This was the idea that I had about this. This is how I articulated it. Does my articulation live up to my idea, or do I need to work on it? Or does my articulation kind of change my idea, and do I need to alter that? Because you need to keep your outline going. You need to not look at your outline as a blueprint that can't be changed. You have to keep both documents have to be kept breathing the whole time you're working on the story. So I told you the story. Joel Kittredge is our cameraman. So I say he's our protagonist, 37 to 40. He's a white guy. Yeah. News camera operator and segment director. Joel wants to grow, but he doesn't quite know it. He lives with the love of his life, Lola Z, but he doesn't know how to proceed. Maybe that's it. This is why I say that you have to keep this going, because I don't know how to articulate what Joel wants in this scene because he doesn't know how to articulate it. Or rather, he doesn't know how to articulate it because I don't know how to articulate it. He knows it when he gets it, though. That's the deal that makes the story worth pursuing, is he wants to grow. He wants to have a stable relationship. He wants to go to the next level, but he doesn't know how to get there. So okay, here we go. Joel does not want to advance his career. He likes working at the Fayetteville level. He has worked in Miami, and he didn't like the big city grind. He learned a lot about how to break into the big markets and has become a star maker to the field reporters he works with. Have you ever had somebody try to push something on you that you don't want? That's kind of where Joel is. Everybody's like, hey, man, maybe when Troy, the news guy, maybe when Troy moves on, he could take you with him. He could put in a good word. And Joel's like, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Now, there is a drag if your character, if your protagonist's want is for nothing to change. That's a drag. So, especially if things are going to change, but they're only going to get worse. Just saw a movie, The Last Showgirl. That was my problem. I don't want to get into opinions on movies, but that was my problem with that movie was it was all getting worse, and she didn't want it to get better. She wanted it to stay the same. And it's like, well, then this is a character study. It's not a story. I like stories. Character studies are for documentaries. Yeah, I said it. So, what are the characters' relationships like, and what are the obstacles the main characters must encounter and overcome in order to get what they want? Lola is Joel's girlfriend, the first real love he has ever had. That becomes told in the short story. My narrator, my third person narrator, says it. In adapting it, it has to be part of the conversation. You know, you have to be very articulate in a screenplay to make sure. I've noticed, get in the habit of watching shows with the subtitles on and pay attention to reading what people say, and you'll realize how much television is still a radio with pictures, and that nobody is afraid to explain things to the audience like they don't understand. It's still radio. It started as radio, and it still works from that tool. Lola is a girlfriend, the first love he's ever had. She is a librarian at the university. She has an advanced degree, which intimidates Joel. He doesn't feel like he's good enough for her. He feels that she outclasses him and that she is going to wake up to this fact and dump him sooner or later, even if he doesn't quite articulate this with himself. He has a nebulous fear, which is a wound around his relationship. He doesn't feel that he's up for it because he's older, plenty of reasons. Everybody's been in relationships where they feel that they're not good enough, I think. If not, you're a sociopath. Troy West, talent. That's part of the story is that Troy calls Joel cameraman and Joel calls Troy talent. Talent, 27, any race. Charming and attractive, a natural talent in front of the camera. He looks up to Joel in the way a lieutenant looks up to a first sergeant. They are on different paths. What I mean by that is though a lieutenant is an officer and a first sergeant is not, he's as high as you can get and has 20 years experience in the Army. Maybe not in doing the stuff that officers do, but he understands everything officers do and could probably do it better. And a lieutenant doesn't know anything, and the first sergeant is there to train him. The 37 news crew are a chorus of anchors, meteorologists, sportscasters, and camera crew, to be named as they evolve. Part of the adaptation process, I realized when I was, so by the way, I wrote these notes because I was going to adapt this story anyway. I didn't write these specifically for this episode. I had already started with this adaptation, and then it became, why don't we make a show about adapting a screenplay from a short story? When I reread my short story, I realized just how vague I was, how it was fine to say the news crew and then just mention one if they have something to say, because everybody has their preconception of what a news crew looks like, about a, and I'm talking about the broadcast news crew. So now it's like, oh, I have to give all of those people names and basic descriptions and figure out where they are in a scene. But I'm able to give them names and personalities so they can ask questions that will answer the questions that my narrator was just handling in an omniscient manner.
Johnny, keep going. I'm going to be right back.
Okay. Okay. In the end, the characters get what they want. Is it good or bad? Joel and Troy drive to Missouri to cover the solar eclipse of 2017. Joel wears a solar-powered digital G-Shock watch. The eclipse, that's a prop. The eclipse, the totality, is an enchanting event, much more than Joel and Troy were expecting. Joel's watch face goes black during the eclipse, but comes back online later that evening. The news story is well produced and gets national play. Headquarters eyes are on Troy. Uh, Another thing, we have to write the news story. We have to write the script for the news story. That's going to be fun. I'm really excited to write this in a script, and I'm super excited to work with Joel or with Kyle on it. Uh, I just think this is going to be a fun story for us to adapt. If you're sticking with me, I really appreciate it because I know that I can talk a lot in prefacing things. I think context is everything. The next day, Joel's watch starts sending Joel messages, which he follows to a police intervention of a neighborhood quarrel regarding two little girls' lemonade stand. This story blows up, and Troy is dispatched to New York to introduce the story with the little girls and on-air audition for the big leagues. On Saturday, Joel goes out on his weekly coffee shop and bookstore treasure hunt, a remnant of his younger days when he lived with roommates. Lola wants to go with him, but when she asks, he freezes up. He's still kind of hung up on, this is my thing. I have to hold on to my own thing about myself in case this doesn't work out. He's holding on to something that doesn't serve him any longer. How many of us do that? How many of us have a friend that isn't even a friend anymore? How many of us have a habit that isn't helpful or even entertaining anymore? Speaking as 18 years sober, I know what it's like to give up something that doesn't serve me anymore. That's something to keep in mind. You can always, that's where the writing is dangerous. Slip your own particulars in and out of your story. His watch spells pawn, and Joel goes to visit his favorite pawn shop. He finds a heavy music stand and is very happy to buy it. He walks up on an armed robbery. He takes out his camera and starts filming. See, that is not in the original story. And when I say camera, I really meant phone. The robber shoots at him and misses and hits a big mirror. The watch alarm beeps loudly and distracts the robber before he can shoot again. Joel hits him with the music stand. Chandru climbs over the counter with a bat. Afterward, Joel looks at the engagement rings. That's the end of the story. Bonus questions. Why does the audience care? There is something magical about a solar eclipse. Now, this is me. This is why I think this is a cool story. My job as a writer is to make you understand why I think this is such a cool story. And to me, anything with a solar eclipse having a magical realism element, I think is cool, especially in a 30-minute thing where you don't have to explain why the watch is doing what it's doing. It's because it's in the story. It's because it has to happen. That's the why now, one of them. The watch's messages feel like they could be Joel's imagination or a God consciousness in the machine. Joel's conundrum and solution are right in front of his face, and the audience is a step ahead of him until the story delivers him to the engagement rings after a life or death moment and the crazy risk of trying to film the robbery. The watch is a whimsical Wall-E gizmo. It is solar powered and set by satellite. It's more plugged into the big picture than Joel without any mystical totality derived communication skills. You understand what I'm saying there? The watch, even before it became magic, this mechanical item, this electromechanical item, is in touch with a satellite. It's that's a pretty big deal. I think that something on your wrist could be connected to a satellite, and you just kind of take it for granted. What do the main characters need? Joel needs to open his eyes wider than a viewfinder. He left the big city grindhouse news station. No criticism of that, but that ended what he had hoped would be a trajectory that never existed. What I'm saying there is Joel thought when he got a job in a big city, he was going to have a big city job. He still had a small town job, only with big city problems. Part of the narrative is that he covered a whole lot of hurricane coverage in Miami, and his footage got national coverage, but he never got a credit for it, and he never got a bonus for it. But the guys he filmed did. So it's like, okay, I get it. This is my piece in the machine. I'm the cameraman. So Joel has been winging it in his personal bachelorhood life and focusing on creating the perfect news segment. Is that a substitute or is that a replacement? Joel changed what he wanted out of the world, and wanted to be not necessarily the big fish in a small pond, but he wanted to do a perfect job. And he found great satisfaction in that. But everybody thinks that he should want more because he's so good at it. That's like, what would make him really, what would anchor him to living in Fayetteville, Arkansas? Maybe if he got married, maybe if he found a girl, maybe if he started a family, it would make sense that this relatively young, footloose, and fancy free bachelor cameraman, a job that should sound sexy, is actually just a job. I mean, it's got its sexiness, it's got its creativity, but Joel has found satisfaction in that, but he hasn't found satisfaction in the rest of his life. So much so that he feels like he has to hang on to a habit that he had from his 20s of, he can afford whole price books. He has a coffee machine at home. He doesn't have to he doesn't have to escape his house and his roommates and go on a thrift shop adventure every Saturday just to maintain his sanity. That's not serving him anymore.
Makes me think of one of my favorite lines from, and excuse me, Harold and Kumar,
Uh-huh.
where forget who says it, but it's just because I'm hung like a horse doesn't mean I need to do porn.
They stole that line from me. But anyway, why now? This is the one where I have a hard time articulating the why now. I mean, in Joel's particular life, he's got a digital watch that's hooked up to the sun, and they have a solar eclipse. And Troy is the perfect age to start getting signs from the universe that it's time to move on from what was going on from what he's holding on to from his 20s. In fact, that might be what I write now. Ta-da! I'm going to write something on our outline notes here. Troy is in need of a sign from the universe that his old habits. I type like I'm wearing softball gloves, that his old habits are no longer serving him, and his new opportunities should not be ignored. You get that? Opportunities. He has an opportunity to move on with his life with a woman who loves him, and he loves her, but he's afraid to take that step. And being afraid to take that step, even if he can't articulate that he's afraid to take that step, it's more like, I told myself I was going to be a bachelor forever, and that's still the story that's in my head, even though I'm not saying it anymore. That fear of her dumping him if he tries to take it to the next level is magnified by Troy being courted by bigger stations, and the experience, probably a couple of bad girlfriend breakups, but also he's already made stars out of his news guys that he has become friends with, and then they've moved on without him. So we all
I
have
also think
fears that are hard to articulate. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so. I think in relationships, sometimes, especially if you have had multiple relationships, you can start to identify the cycle. So it could be where he's at a point in this relationship where he does have to make a decision, and just the knowing that I've got to do something is kind of pulling him into a direction where he's like, I don't want to do anything because I have to, because that's what I've seen in the previous relationships. And that could just turn out to not be the case.
That's exactly on the money. There's also the notion of this is the first girl he's ever lived with. And it's kind of like, why isn't it enough that we're living together? Like, why is it that she moved in with me, or we moved in together, and yet I still feel insecure in this relationship? It's like, because I keep a life jacket, or a lifeboat in the form of half price books and pawn shops and coffee shops on Saturday. I keep that lifeboat inflated. So does she as well? You know, she must have. If I have this reservation of going to the next level, which I don't even really know what that looks like. This doesn't exactly look like I thought it would look. Uh, and all change is trauma. Keep that in mind. All change is trauma, whether it's good trauma or bad trauma. When you have change, some things are going to fall away and some things are going to expand. And some of the things that are going to fall away, you're really afraid to lose, even though they don't serve you anymore, but they're still a part of you. And that's kind of the thing. It's like a breakup, a breakup is a trauma, even if it was bad for you, because it's traumatic to think that that person no longer thinks of you the way you imagine they think of you. That's a loss. That is, it's very self-serving and kind of pathological, but, breakups are hard even when they're necessary. So sometimes getting together with somebody is just as hard because you're attached to who you were already. So, what are the main characters' wounds and aches? Joel wanted to be a cinematographer when he was young. None of this is in the script. You know what I mean? Like, this is backstory. And the backstory is what's really important for your journaling. Joel wanted to be a cinematographer when he was young. He went to cameraman school, but got caught up in the news business instead of film. He had a talent for working local news and was poached by a Miami station. He thought this would be the next big step for him, but it was a dead-end position, and he worked more hours for less pay. Worst of all, his hurricane coverage got international play, but he went uncredited and unrecognized for it. He returned to Arkansas after 3 years, to a higher salary, lower cost of living, and a director credit on his segments. See, I think that's really important because he wanted to be a cinematographer. He wanted to be known for what he's doing. And most cameramen are kind of uncredited. And this, again, is all based on my real friend who gets a director credit on his news segments after he had moved off from Arkansas to Miami and then come back. And that was one of the things of his thing. Anyway, one of his terms. And a director credit, okay, to a higher salary, lower cost of living, and a director credit on his segments, which no one else did anywhere. He got something great, his upgraded position in a job that is pretty cool, but it wasn't what he wanted. And though he is happy with what he has, he doesn't know what he wants now, or at least is afraid to admit that what he wants in any other part of his life. He's afraid to admit what he wants because he got a substitute prize. He's still not a cinematographer, and he's settled into being a cameraman, and he has made the most out of being a news cameraman, and he found the nest that he wants to live in and hatch his stories, but it's still not what he wanted. But guess what? Even that want, that cinematographer want, doesn't serve him anymore. Does that make sense? Wanting something, even if you never got it, that want doesn't serve you. But it's hard to turn that off when you've been telling yourself that story, especially if that's the story that led the trajectory of your life to learn the camera work. But he's not a frustrated news guy. That's the dichotomy. That's where the why becomes, don't ask me why, because the why can have 12 different facets to it. He has a cool girlfriend who is crazy about him, but he thinks she'll move on sooner or later. He makes stars out of local news reporters and they move on, which is a little bit like abandonment. What is the jeopardy, the danger, the price? Losing Lola to his stalled out indecision. Whew, that happens. That's a very real thing. And he already knows that that's a real danger. He knows that he needs to step up, but he doesn't know what stepping up looks like. It's not until he sees those rings with broken glass on them. The broken glass, I don't want to get too into my symbolism means this, but the broken glass, the robbery, the gunplay, it's like, hey, writing is dangerous, so is marriage. So is stepping out of your comfort zone. So he's afraid of that. He's afraid if it's hard enough to lose a girlfriend, think about losing the woman you live with. Think about losing the woman you're married to because you don't know how to be a live-in boyfriend or you don't know how to be a husband. Well, sometimes you got to make a leap of faith. You got to just jump off of that cliff and hope she's holding your hand with you when you hit the ground running, when you hit the ground running. So, what do the characters fear most? What shuts them down emotionally? What breaks them into a sweat? Joel is afraid to look vulnerable or to even admit his vulnerability to himself. He is also afraid of losing, afraid that this relationship is not as two-sided as it appears. Does that make sense? Maybe
Yeah.
he's more crazy.
He
He
could fear that they're not on the same page. It could be a issue of communication.
It could be an issue of communication on top of insecurity. Like, because if you're insecure about something, it doesn't matter what somebody tells you. You know, if I took a marriage workshop and it was the Imago workshop by a psychologist, relationship person named Pat Love. If you're a newlywed, I recommend everybody to look into this. And one of the things that I learned in that was if you're having a hard time in a relationship communicating, make a reservation, take a few minutes and say, okay, this is what I am afraid of. I am afraid that you are going to get bored with me and leave. And then you say, okay, tell me that back. And if they go, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to do that. What are you talking about? Why would you think that? You're doing it wrong. If you say, tell me that back, they need to say back to you, you are afraid that I am going to lose interest in you and leave. Then they can say, that's not going to happen. But you have to make sure that both of you understand each other. This is way past this story, but the point being, it's really hard to communicate if you don't know how. And that's something that Joel is going to have to learn because this story has a satisfying ending to me. Does the story have a satisfying ending? Why, we were just talking about that. Yes,
Huh?
Joel interrupts the robbery. He's in the story, not filming it. Big deal. That was the big change of having him in the short story just walk up. In the thing, his instincts are that he pulls out his iPhone and starts filming. And in one early draft here of filling or fiddling around, I have that the guy shoots him and he hits his phone and the mirror, and that Chandru gives him a new phone or a pawned phone out of his inventory. I don't know if that's necessary, but I like the idea of his phone. He's like holding it out, so it's not like he's going to get hit himself. But then his phone gets shot, putting him in the situation, not filming it. And I think that's going to be um, an important piece of subtext in the story, and that when he's in this situation, he takes an action, and that is whacking this robber upside the head with the music stand. Whereas if he's an objective cameraman, he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have given the starving orphan a sandwich. He would have been taking it in as a story instead of taking it in as something in his life that is actually happening. And in that moment, getting over a fear. I mean, of course, he was afraid when he walks up. He's more well when the phone gets shot out of his hand and he's in it. He's got an oh shit, I've got to make a decision, and he swings the music stand and knocks the guy upside the head. He's in the story. It's his story now. He's not just a witness. And what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that kind of subtext?
Um, yeah, I love that. And I think it's going to take some work getting there. Definitely reading the short story when we arrived there, I hadn't kind of thought of that, what you were saying earlier about, present it, don't explain it. So I think there is a way that we could probably present that better when we do the script. Because yeah, you're right. That is the thing that changes everything.
Right? And you know, we can set up in the drive in the when they're driving to Missouri, uh, we could sprinkle out some breadcrumbs about who about Joel's private life, you know, because
Hmm.
the story starts in the parking lot of him getting the equipment at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's getting the equipment ready, waiting for Troy to show up. So Troy shows up, they're driving. Troy brought donuts. They don't really have to do anything, and they got a couple of hours. So we could have, a little conversation there. I don't want to get bogged down in a
Or
conversation too early, though.
yeah. Well, I was going to say a more simple way to get to it could be the audience witnessing Joel see Troy get admiration and respect for something we know is Joel's because of Joel, you
Right.
know?
Absolutely.
Like, because he is the person in front of the camera, he is the person that gets the accolades. So maybe it's somebody saying you did such a great job on X, Y, and Z, and it's something that he obviously had nothing to do with, like I couldn't believe you found this location to shoot at, or maybe something as simple as that.
And you know what else? You got me thinking. Yeah. And again, it goes back to dialogue. The power of good, tight, terse dialogue is we have a flashback in the middle. So when they get back in the story, when they get back and they show the news, they all go out to a happy hour, and Lola shows up at the happy hour. She's invited, and she shows up to the happy hour, and it's kind of the first time everybody's meeting her, and so there are like some questions, and we have a flashback, and in the flashback we get to know a little bit more about Joel, in that. Joel was playing with a kind of a loose jam band on a Sunday afternoon at a barbecue place. It's outside. He's at the outside, the backyard of a barbecue joint. He's playing guitar, doing in the story. It's knocking on heaven's door, but it'll be just a folk standard in the
Hmm.
screenplay. And they take a break. Joel goes to sit down, and a waitress walks up and gives him a jalapeno cheese sausage wrap in a tortilla, and she hands it to him, serves him, and says, "This is from the lady at the end of the bar," and there is no bar. Like it's a total play on the hotel law, the hotel saloon kind of a thing. And he looks around, and he's sitting there holding a goddamn sausage in his hand, and he's kind of confused, and he looks around and he sees a table of all these girls, women, and they're wearing runs or t-shirts from a fun run, and they're all wearing their medals, and they're all wearing fun run t-shirts, and she's staring at him, and she's kind of cracking up at his confusion, right? And then so he realizes that, oh, she sent me this. So he gets up and he walks over. Maybe one of his bandmates says, "Dude, go talk to her." That's even better. One of his bandmates says, "Dude, go talk to her." So he goes up and he talks to her, and then we fade in. That's the end of the flashback. So we know that she made the first move. It's like, dude, she was attracted to you. Like all of these little things that you ignore are in your favor. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's a good place. We'll talk about flashbacks when we get to that writing. A lot of people overuse flashbacks, but that's another conversation for another. Hey, how are we doing on time? I didn't really check what time we started.
We are hella overtime.
Oh, we are? We're over 2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to do you have a satisfying ending? Yes, Joel interrupts the robbery. He's in the story, not filming it. The story ends on him shopping for an engagement ring. And I've thought in the screenplay that we'd start with, we'd end on the scene of him asking about the engagement rings and maybe reaching for one. And then a montage of them in their wedding, like a wedding montage over the credits, and they're both wearing G-Shocks, and she's wearing the ring that he was reaching for in the tray. And so you've got to, and it could be, this is production, but it could be whatever the song was that he was playing in the bar. So
I love the idea just on the production and of this character who is not getting the hint,
yeah,
so in his own world that he doesn't see the obvious, and just having like advertisements for wedding rings in the background he's constantly walking past and things like that.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
like
Those are the
really on the
breadcrumbs.
nose production design outside of this guy who is very clueless.
He could even say that he makes money on the side filming weddings. Like
Mhm.
that could be one of the things. Like so here's the what we'll leave you with. The beauty of writing everything down and not thinking you can fly by the seat of your pants and just start on page one and write all the way until you get to the end and it's all going to hold together. And that you don't have to construct it methodically, that you don't have to consider the elements, and that you don't have to pay attention to classic story structure. Um, is that once you have something written, you can make it better. You can fix it, you can improve it, you can make other people fall in love with your idea. But you can't make people fall in love with your idea unless you write it down. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're just talking, which is what I've been doing for a couple of hours. But I did prove to you that we do have something in the barrel for next week. So, next week, we're going to actually start on writing the signposts. So the signpost part of the Hart chart is when you get into the plot details. And you will find, if you write a character-driven story, that the plot details are the sign, or the character details are the signposts. This story wouldn't happen to somebody else. That's part of why now, is because it's not happening to Troy. Troy's a supporting player. It's happening to Joel. And because it's happening to Joel, now it's going to be happening to Zola, or Lola. The story is going to move in that kind of a circle. I know that we went over, and I really appreciate your patience, Kyle. We will have all of our
Ooh.
technical stuff figured out next week, and we will be a live stream. And if you're interested, I've got episode 0 posted, and you can watch again. You can get the whole story if you're interested, and if not, I should have the webpage up next week too, or we can post the story, and you can just read it instead. It's a 14-page story. It takes less than a half hour to read. So it will just, you'll know what you're adapting if you read the story. And I'm not saying that to promote myself as a great writer. Again, I wouldn't submit it to the New Yorker, but I like the story elements and I like the way it turned out. So,
Who knows? Maybe you would after we're done with
I
it.
do think that. I do think that I will revise the story at some point, but I've got bigger fish to fry first.
If I can just add one last thing before we jump off here, I think that if you're a writer or you've written something and you think it's perfect and no notes, no changes, this is my thing, then you probably need to write something else. You're not going to grow with a story like that. You're not learning anything about this, and that's definitely not what we're trying to do here. It's the creativity is a process and you should embrace that. You shouldn't hold kind of your ideas sacred and be stringent in your views.
Let me just tag that. I absolutely love everything you just said, and I want to tag that part of the reason of creating this program that we're doing is one, I love working with Kyle. I want to keep writing. Kyle wants to learn to write. That's all beautiful. That's all supporting players, right? That's all a supporting player for the gist of this. What I hope people will take away from watching this show and watching us develop a script over the next 12 weeks, think about that. By the end of 12 weeks, everything that we've been talking about is going to be a nice, tight, roughly 30-page screenplay. It's going to be nice and tight. Uh, Probably won't be ready to submit. It'll still be a first draft, but it'll be a nice tight first draft. Um, the thing that I personally want to get people in on is find a collaborator, find a co-writer. By the time we get to the end of this, Kyle's not my supporting character here. He's very much my technical support, but we are co-writers on this screenplay. We are 50-50 on this screenplay. So when we get done, the totality, if that whatever the title is by the time we get done, it's going to be by Johnny Neill and Kyle Scott. It's not he's not just my helper, he's my co-writer. And why I think that's important is that everything in film is collaborative. Everything is collaborative. There's never no one makeup guy, there's everything is collaborative. And yet we still hold on to this romantic notion of the tortured screenwriter or just tortured writer who's toiling away in the middle of the night and he's hungry and it's not working. And we'll get into the mythology of the tortured writer at another time. But I just really want to stress, and if you don't have a friend, by the time we start getting comments, see what people that are writing comments, what they think. And if you go, hey, I kind of agree with that, reach out to them, reach out to somebody you'd like to work with and tell them to watch this show. And you know what I'm saying? Find somebody to work with, not just somebody to read your stuff as a trade. Find somebody that will work with you, and recognize that any kind of a co-writership is never going to be 50-50 100% of the time. There will be times when Kyle brings a whole lot more to the table because I'm kind of tapped out, and I'll bring more to the table because Kyle's kind of tapped out. And that's okay. It balances out because it wouldn't have gotten written without both of us. And so that's the thing that I really want to stress as the goal for this show, is to teach people and also writers' rooms. You need to learn to work with writers. If you want to be a TV writer, you're sure not going to be doing that in isolation. That's going to be a room of that was one of the big things of the strike, was that they wanted to shrink the size of writers' rooms. And it's like, yeah, because you're a tech bro and you're not thinking from a writer's perspective. So think of that. Think of the joy of writing with somebody else. And I want to tag that with, nobody's trying to steal your ideas, dude. Don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to talk about stuff, because nobody's trying to rip you off. I see that on Reddit. Well, it happened. I entered a contest, and the new Paul Rudd movie is exactly like the contest I entered 2 years ago. And it's like, oh, wow, Paul Rudd. I wonder what else I wonder how he got this far without stealing from contests. You know what I mean? Like, don't be afraid to put your stuff out there. If it makes you feel better, send it to the WGA as soon as you get it ready. Like as soon as you even have a basic script that is not presentable, but you feel like you are afraid because you're such a genius that you think you're going to blow up on the scene, go by all means, pay $40 or whatever it is to register it with the WGA. But don't worry about it, man. It's going to be marked with your final draft metadata. It's really hard to steal somebody's work these days.
There's two kinds of people in Hollywood: those who make movies and those who sue people who make movies.
Right. Exactly.
Like, which one do you want to be?
Exactly. And those are the ones who don't get hired. If you think that also people get the same idea all the time, not just because, oh, Wyatt Earp, well, they're making a Wyatt Earp movie. Let's us make a Wyatt Earp movie. Let's us make Tombstone. No, two people got the same idea. It's like that just happens all the time. There's only two stories. I don't have to say it 500 times. All right, man. I'm real excited that we got through this. Sorry I rambled for so long. You don't have to watch it all at once. So next time we'll have a meter running and it'll be a lot tighter. But I hope that familiarized you with what the Hart Chart is. Also, we're going to be writing on Final Draft. If you want to be a screenwriter, I'm not getting paid to say this. Final Draft is the industry standard. So use that, and you don't have to worry about your margins. You just have to understand what those margins represent. But Final Draft will take care of all that for you. And it truly is the industry standard. It is what they feed into the screenplay on Final Draft is what they'll feed into their production program to figure out how many shots is this going to take? How many scenes is this? How many scenes, the metadata of the script itself, not just the tech part of it. So thank you, Kyle. Anything
Thank you, Johnny.
plug? Anything else you got going on you want to talk about?
Oh no, but we will be getting into that kind of the more we move down the line.
Yeah, well, believe it or not,
we've got lots of plans.
We have a pretty tight format for how the show is going to flow from here on out. But the getting introduced and getting terminology out of the way, kind of knew this was going to be a little bit like my background. It's going to be it's all going to bleed over on each other. So thanks for watching, and see you next week.